Okay, so the first thing I do is take a cookie sheet with sides and I cover it with tin foil. I have my oven set at 375 and I do use the convection. If you don't have that, it might just take a few minutes longer. It depends how you like your bacon. We like ours extra crispy or more on the crisp side. So then I go ahead and just separate the bacon and put it onto the cookie sheet, trying not to overlap them if possible. And then I put it in the oven for about 25 minutes. For my egg replacer in the pancakes, I use applesauce and I use 1 teaspoon of baking powder per egg that it calls for in the recipe. I also omitted the oil on the back of this package, so I'm not exactly following the directions that are on the gluten-free Bisquick. So I got my 2 teaspoons of baking powder. I'm going to go ahead and mix that into the applesauce first. And you can see it starts to get bubbly. You want that to happen. That's kind of what makes them more fluffy because we're not using eggs. After we kind of get that mixed in, we're going to go ahead and now add our Bisquick. We're making the whole box. This recipe is for the whole box. And then we're going to add, this is 2 cups of milk. We're going to start with 2 cups, and I always end up having to see what it looks like when I start mixing, but we start with 2 cups. You want to try to get out the lumps. You don't have to get them all out, but as much as possible. If it's a little too thick, we add a little bit more. You do want this batter to be a little on the thinner side. If it's too thick, the pancakes end up being a little bit too dense when you cook them. I've trialed and errored this many times to get this to work. So I think I got it down, but I'm going to add a little bit more milk and keep stirring. One more little dab here, and you just want to add little bits at a time after you do that first 2 cups. It might end up being about another 1/4 cup that I added. Next, I'm going to put in some vanilla extract. Maybe 1/2 teaspoon. You can always add more or omit it if you don't want vanilla. These are kind of like a cinnamon vanilla flavored pancake. You don't necessarily taste the applesauce when you use it as an egg replacer. I always add a little bit of sprinkle of salt in here too. Make sure that's all mixed up really good. And then the cinnamon. You can use as much or as little cinnamon, or obviously if you don't want cinnamon, you don't have to put it in. We use a decent amount, but with this much, it's not overpowering. So it looks like a lot. Maybe might have been a tablespoon that I added. It's kind of just by taste, but this ends up not being an overpowering cinnamon taste with how much I added. I like to flip the bacon over about halfway through the cooking time. You don't have to. Sometimes I forget. It still turns out okay. But if I remember, I like to flip it over. Back in the oven she goes. And I wanted to finish the bacon before I started the pancakes. This is kind of how we like ours, a little more on the crisp side. I'm going to go ahead and put them onto a paper towel lined plate. And I have my griddle. It's preheated. Probably medium to medium low. You don't want it super hot. I would say medium temperature. I put 4 of them on this griddle. I'm using like a gravy ladle. Seems to be about the right amount. And you want to wait for these little bubbles to start happening on the top before you flip them over. It ends up being a couple minutes at least. Once you see those bubbles, very carefully kind of go around the sides and then flip. Get that nice golden color. It's perfect. They end up being really nice and fluffy. On the inside, that's the baking powder helps. So now I'm gonna add my syrup and I'm gonna go in for the taste test. Nice and fluffy. And of course the important taste tester here. I think he likes them. Okay, so after I cook bacon, I always put my diffuser on because I just am not a fan of that lingering bacon smell. So I'm gonna show you guys what I put in my diffuser after I cooked breakfast this morning. I put some water in first, and then I'm using Stress Away. I put in, I think, 5 drops. 4 or 5 drops is good. And then I wanted to mix that with Christmas Spirit. It smells really good. Mixed with the Stress Away, it's kind of like vanilla and it's just really yummy. I put a couple drops of that. It's a little stronger than the Stress Away. And then I put my lid on and I turn it on. This lantern has a couple different light options. I like the little candle flicker. That's all for today's video. Make sure you hit subscribe and the little bell so you get notified every time I upload new videos. Have a good day and we'll see you next time.